These severe events are happening more often. They're happening more severely as well. So yes, it's got the hallmark of climate change all over it. Although you cannot say Storm Boris, that is climate change. The fact is that these storms, call it Boris or call it whatever you like, are happening more often, and their impacts are becoming more devastating.
Now, the Met Office has issued storm warnings across large parts of England and Wales, bringing the summer to a rather abrupt end. There's a risk of lightning and hail with intense rain that could lead to flooding. In Europe, Storm Boris has led to the worst flooding in decades along the Danube. It's now hit Italy. Thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes. And in some areas, the rain hasn't stopped in the last 48 hours. Let's speak to the meteorologist John Hammond. Morning.
Hi, Chloe.
So let's begin in Europe, because, there's some quite startling pictures. I'm just looking here of some photographs coming from Portugal with people chest high in water.
Yes, actually, and it's quite interesting that in parts of Italy, which have been badly hit by the flooding in the last 48, 72 hours, a year or so ago, they had flooding in a similar area, and that was considered to be a once-in-500-year event. And guess what? A year later, the same sort of scale of flooding has occurred again. So, once in 500-year event, what does that mean these days when obviously the climate is on the move? So those sorts of return periods, which we as meteorologists have routinely used. When I first started in forecasting, I was told, well, this will be a once in 100-year event. You can't apply those rules anymore because the big picture is changing. In terms of the big picture across Europe, as you say, it's southern Europe and the southeast of Europe, which has been so badly affected by Storm Boris. Storm Boris actually has started moving bodily westwards again. It's weakened to some extent, but it has brought that flooding rain to parts of Italy, then on into Iberia, so Spain and Portugal, as you mentioned. It's now, or the remnants of Storm Boris, is what's responsible for those storm warnings you've mentioned for parts of England and Wales. It's not going to be anything like as bad as we've seen further south and east across Europe, but it's the same weather system that's moving northwards now through France and eventually later on today into southern parts of England and Wales. I don't want to set the alarm bells ringing. We're not going to see the sorts of scenes of devastation which we've seen further southeast across Europe. But that instability in the atmosphere, the remnants of Storm Boris, are going to move their way northwards into parts of the UK. Now, it's across southern England, the Midlands and Wales, where we're likely to see some thunderstorms developing. Very hit and miss the storms obviously are. Many of you will escape the storms entirely and wonder what all the fuss was about. But the potential is there atmospherically, both today and tomorrow, for some nasty storms across these more central and western parts of England and Wales. Meanwhile, further north across the country, Chloe, the fine weather continues across Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. I think it's going to be another nice day. A lot more cloud further east, though, towards those North Sea coasts. The weather is on the move. So I mentioned that the chance of storms today, the chance of storms tomorrow across those southern areas. By Sunday and into Monday, and consequently, or sort of coincidentally, it's when the autumn equinox is occurring. There's going to be a completely different complexion to the weather. We'll have lost the sunshine. We'll have gained a lot of rain. By the early part of next week, it looks very autumnal, very wet in places, and temperatures are going to take a nosedive as well. So some of us have been basking in temperatures up into the mid to high 20s in the last couple of days. Do you know what? By the middle of next week, some of us will be suffering and probably struggling to get higher than the mid-teens. So much colder, much wetter as we go into next week. And you've been talking about the winter fuel payments, concerns about keeping warm. I think the conversation actually about keeping warm will be heightened by the complexion of the weather next week. It really will feel like autumn. The warmth will have gone by then. We'll be grabbing layers and nights will be chilly as well.
When we're talking about this flooding, which is the remnants of Storm Boris coming to the Midlands, southeast areas like that, how could we experience flooding and how severe could it be? Clearly not what some of Europe is experiencing at the moment, but should we prepare ourselves for that?
Nothing like as bad, a completely different scale of impact. I think there will be some thunderstorms around, the sorts of thunderstorms where, you'll get a layer of hail on the ground for a short period of time. Some drains will overflow. Locally, we could see some flash flooding, but only on a very local scale, Chloe. So I don't think that we've got yellow warnings at the moment. I don't think they'll be escalated to amber or red. So that's a sort of gauge of how severe these storms are going to be. On a scale of 1 to 10, I I'd give it a 3 or a 4,
Right,
basically.
okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And in Europe, I mean, I'm fascinated by this idea that you were saying that a year ago we were told that the storms that hit Europe were a once in 500-year event, and the same thing has happened again. This is what, climate change?
Yeah, as we always say, to sort of caveat it, you can't put one event, you can't say that is down to climate change.
But we've got a pattern now, haven't we?
Exactly, you've got it. These severe events are happening more often, they're happening more severely as well. So yes, it's got the hallmark of climate change all over it, although you cannot say Storm Boris, that is climate change. The fact is that these storms, call it Boris or call it whatever you like, are happening more often, and their impacts are becoming more devastating. So those return periods I mentioned, the once in a 100-year event, 200-year event, you can't really apply those sort of metrics to a climate which is now changing.
Good to speak to you as ever. Thank you for your time. That's John Hammond there. He is the meteorologist.